Hello everyone, welcome once again to the Adventures Travel Club television show. Betty, we find ourselves in the area of Fatima, Portugal.
Yes, and it's a wonderful experience here. This is just a little bit different, this particular tape that you'll be seeing, because in our journey to Fatima, this was more of a pilgrimage than our other visits have been to the different countries.
Right, and in the area where we are right now is outside of the main area of Fatima, which most people know as Fatima. And this is the area outside the little village where the children actually lived. In fact, this is where the very first apparitions of the Angel of Peace, or the Angel of Portugal, appeared for the first and the third time, and this was in the year 1916. Now, this was before Our Lady appeared. The angel appeared and gave the children instructions.
Now, these were just little peasant children that she was giving instructions to as to how to pray.
The angel gave instructions
yes.
to.
Given by the angel. And curiously, it was also the first communion for Jacinta, because she was too young. She was only 6 years old. And at that time, she would do her first year on catechesis, and after that, she would take her first communion, like every other children, of course. So she was too young. She was 1 year before First Communion, if you want. And this First Communion was given by the angel, and also to Lucia and Francisco. And so if you want to go up there to see the angel and the whole monument, you will see that the angel is holding a cup and a host, representing the same communion he gave the children. And also, in the first apparition, he told the children some words, and the words are inscribed there on the wall. And I believe you all know this praying the angel taught the children. Is the praying of the angel, of course. He said, "Do not fear, I'm the angel of peace. Pray with me. My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I ask you forgiveness for those who don't believe, don't hope, don't wait, and don't love you." And so, as you see, the angel, spring of 1916.
Betty, I think what is so interesting here is that the angel actually appeared first, and there were 2 times that the angel appeared here, and then once just a little ways further from here, which is closer to their home, at a well, which we'll see later on in the program, and that Our Lady's 4th appearance was probably about 500 steps from here, but that was a year later on the 19th of August in 1917. And of course, this is a distance from the big area that we know as Fatima.
When Our Lady appeared, more or less in this place, not exactly where you have the monument, but according to the words of the children, Maria appeared more in this place where you have the candles to burn. And so this marked then the 4th apparition. We started calling this place Valinhos, and you have in this stone some words, which were the words to the children.
Well, now, Betty, we're going to move on probably about 400 meters from this beautiful site that we see right here, and we're going to go into the little village, of course, where the children lived, the cousins, and of course we're going to visit 2 of the homes, and the homes really haven't changed that much, since probably the time of the apparitions. Huh? Yeah.
When they were there. But, you should mention a little something about the Stations of the Cross. You
they
did show
were
a
along the way
picture,
there.
but all along this, we have the Stations of the Cross
Right.
that you can make at your convenience.
Yeah, and it is beautiful. Of course, it was raining the day that we were there, but I really enjoyed this because I knew part of the story of Fatima before, but I didn't know the part about the angel appearing to the children, teaching them how to pray, and also giving the children communion.
Yeah, that was new to me, too.
It was very, very interesting. And so now we're just about 400 meters from where we just saw the statue of the angel, and we're going into the little village right here. And as I said, it probably hasn't changed that much. It's a very quaint little village, and very, very nice to visit. I think this really gives us the flavor of really being there and going really back into time.
It's unusual because they haven't made it commercial like they do so many of the places that you go with things to sell and all of that. It's very nice to have it be simple.
And we're also going to see one of the relatives of Lucy, or Lucia, I should say, as we're here too. So let's listen now to our guide as we go inside.
So as you can see, this was a very small house, though the family of Lucia was not as big as Jacinta and Francisco. In fact, you have a picture of Lucia's family. And in fact, there's one people missing, one of the sisters. There were 4 sisters and 1 brother. So you have there her brother and the sister-in-law and the niece, and then you have 2 of the sisters of Lucia and her mother on her left-hand side. So there's 1 sister missing there, and the father, he was already had died at that time, 1921. And 1921 was also the year that Lucia first entered one convent. Yes. She first left Aljustrel, this village. She went to Porto, on the north of Portugal, to the convent of Vilar. And sometime later she went to Tui and Pontevedra. Tui and Pontevedra are already Spanish cities in the area, in the region of Galicia. And there in the memories of Lucia, in the book she wrote, I believe some of you already bought it, she also speaks about, not exactly about apparitions, but messages that Our Lady kept telling her. And one of the big requests of Our Lady was that Lucia asked the church, the Pope, the bishop, anyone, to make the consecration of the heart of the Immaculate Heart of Maria for the conversion of Russia. And you know that it has been done throughout the time. And last October, the statue of Our Lady of Fatima, the one you have in the little chapel of the apparition, went to Rome so that the Pope John Paul II could do one more, the consecration of the Immaculate Heart. The consecration of Russia, of course, to the Immaculate Heart of Our Lady. And so this was the special request that Lucia kept hearing even after the apparitions, that so-called apparitions of Fatima. Then she came back again. She was in Pontevedra and Tui, like I told you. She came back to Porto again, and in 1948 she entered the Carmel of Saint Teresa in Coimbra. So, like I told you, since 1948 she's a Carmelite nun. She visited Fatima many times, including in 1982 when the Pope John Paul II first visited Fatima. But another Pope, Paul VI, was in Fatima in 1967, and Lucia, she was here too. And Lucia came to Fatima, at times, to help some artists, some sculptors, some painters.
Well, it was interesting that she was still alive and could tell the artist what Our Lady looked like, and also what the angel of Portugal looked like. Now we're right outside of the house here, and we're going to walk down to the well. And, of course, we stop and see.
Oh, of course. Animals.
Right?
There really is something, it's like babies when you stop and see little animals that, that kind of gets at the heart a little bit.
And it was nice that her relative was there in the house while we were there visiting. Of course, now we've left, and so she's going to go back to the other duties that she has. But we're going to go down now. This was the place also that we mentioned a little bit earlier. That was the second apparition of the Angel of Peace, or the Angel of Portugal. And this is where we're standing right now. What you're looking at is just down from where the sheep were, and this is the well.
That's
and again, pardon me?
Excuse me, I was just going to say, that's kind of a funny statue. Did you, as you look at it, it kind of, is it three-dimensional?
Yes, it is, because you can
see,
walk,
you can see,
clear around
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So this was interesting. I thought the area around it was interesting. As we stated a little bit earlier, I don't think that this has changed too much. I mean, since 1916, 1917, and that's what's so wonderful about it, because there's so many places. Betty, you keep relating to, when we go to Bethlehem, you want to still see the shepherds. Well, at least here we're going to see the sheep
Yeah, well,
and the vegetables.
I
that are
don't think
growing,
those are the same sheep, Marv. Now,
They're probably-
1916 and you up into night, you think those are the same
No, I
sheep?
think they were the descendants.
It's
of the
okay. Well,
same
that's
sheep.
okay. That's all right. And another thing about the angel, you were teasing me about the angel early on because I called her.
Well, it could be either or, right?
Okay. All right. Well,
All
we
right.
just straighten that out a little bit.
Okay,
I don't
good.
really believe they call angels by sex at all. It's just
Probably
an
not.
angel, except Michael and Gabriel. I mean,
Yeah,
okay.
well,
all right.
that's true. So who knows? Anyway, right now we're going to go inside the house of Jacinta and also Francisco and listen to our guide again.
This same period, 5 children of this family died. So Francisco, he was the first one in 1919. He got sick and he was in this bedroom for a long, long time. And people who knew Francisco, they said that he was not really bothered with the idea that he was going to die. He was in fact happy because he would meet the Virgin Mary. And you know that there is this very famous Secrets of Fatima. And one of the secrets, one of the messages was that Jacinta and Francisco, they would die sooner so that they would help Virgin Mary to pray and, to save the sinners. So people say that he was really, he accepted the fact very well. He was happy to die and to meet the Virgin Mary. And this was the other thing that was also difficult to understand in such a small boy. Jacinta, she died 1 year later. She died in 1920, probably also because of the Spanish flu, of the influenza. But in fact, Jacinta, she got worse and she got tuberculosis. So she was for a long period, she was sick in this bedroom just behind you. And after that, she was sent to Lisbon, to an hospital for children, where she died in February 1920. So, because of these children, we told that originally the children were buried in the parish cemetery, which is true. Francisco, when he died, he was buried there in the first place. And in 1952, his body was removed and transferred into the basilica, inside the basilica of the shrine. About Jacinta, something different happened. There was, at that time, there was a nobleman. He was called a baron of Alvaiazre, and he wanted to have one of these children buried in his family tomb. And so what happened is that Jacinta was the chosen one, and for about 15 years she was buried in this other tomb, so from 1920 to 1935. In 1935, her body was exhumed and transferred into the parish cemetery, for the same tomb where her brother was already buried. And the interesting thing is that when the body was removed, exhumed in this case, the face was intact. She had exactly the same face, nothing was corrupted. The rest of the body, of course, it was a little decomposed, but the face was exactly the same. So this was also a very good sign for the story of the children. And so in 1935, she was buried in the same tomb as her brother. And in 1951, she was the first one to be again exhumed and transferred inside the Basilica of Fatima. This gentleman you have here is called João, and he's nephew of Jacinta and Francisco. And curiously, I've already heard some of you speaking about João Marto, which was in fact one of the brothers of Jacinta and Francisco. Well, this other gentleman, he died 1 year ago. Well, next month it will be 1 year. And he was the only survivor, in fact, from that generation, if you want. He was 94 years old, and he was then the last brother of Jacinta and Francisco. And everybody, he was already a little bit, weak because he was old. And everybody was waiting him to survive till at least May the 13th, so that he could assist to the beatification of the brother and sister. But unfortunately, he died like 15 days before, on April the 28th. So he really didn't get it. But he lived here in Aljustrel, and many people used to talk to him, and especially people would ask him to sign up books. the books, for instance, like those you bought from the words of Lucia, and you would sign up his name, and people would have this souvenir, if you want, of the oldest people from that generation, and the only survivor, in fact. So, like I was telling you, 11 people lived here, the brothers and the sisters of Francisco, and like I told you too, this family was a little bit poor than Lucia's family. They had the poverty at that time was very relative, because people would live more or less all in the same condition, in the same way. The only, sign for wealthiness was the hearth they owned, the properties, the size of the flocks they had, and of course the biggest flocks belonged to the family of Lucia. Of course they also had some sheep and goat, but the most of it was property of Lucia's family. But, as they were family, because Jacinta and Francisco and Lucia mothers, they were sisters, so they were very close. They were cousins, and they were very close and very friends. So they used to hang around always together. Curiously, but I should say it in Lucia's house, but I can tell you now, Lucia came to her house 54 years after. So the last time she'd come here was 54 years ago. Because, as you know, Lucia, she's a Carmelite nun. She lives in a convent, she's cloistered. She lives there since 1948. So, 52 years that she lives in this convent. And every other time that she came to Fatima, she stayed for a very short time, and she would never had a chance to visit her home where she was born. So she stayed like 5 days here. She had a chance to visit many places, including her house. And of course, the fact that Lucia was coming to Fatima, it's also very important for people, because Lucia, she's the only survivor, and people already consider her a saint, like her cousins Jacinta and Francisco. About the canonization of Jacinta and Francisco, probably it will happen after the death of Lucia. We don't know. But we are waiting for the second miracle necessary for the canonization. Because the first miracle that was, given to Jacinta and Francisco was the fact that one lady from around Fatima, not far away, about 30 kilometers away from Fatima, she got sick when she was young, and for about 20 years, more than 20 years, she was on her bed. She couldn't walk, she couldn't sit. She was completely paralyzed. And so she decided to pray a novene to Jacinta and really ask her with really faith and things. And after long praying, she was a little bit despaired, and she said, "Oh, so I pray, and nothing happens to me." So all of a sudden, she was on her bed. And she felt like sitting. She said, "Oh, I have to sit myself." And so she tried, and she did. And everybody which was taking care of her, because she was living in a residential, people was very scared and said, "Oh, what's happening?" Because for about 20 years that she couldn't sit. So she was very, very happy, and she kept praying and praying. And sometime after, she could already move herself in a wheelchair. And one day she thought, well, if I could sit, probably I can walk too. And so all of a sudden she started walking, and people was more scared yet and surprised. And so, of course, the lady became a big phenomenon, a miracle, in fact. She was sent to the Vatican many times. She was examined by many doctors, and science really couldn't prove anything. It was not work of science. It was a miracle. That's what they declared. And so the lady, when it happened, the lady start giving some interviews and explaining what happened to her. And she was, in fact, the miracle that led, or that, in fact, accelerated this process for the beatification of Jacinta and Francisco.
Well, Betty, now we're going to drive to the little parish church here in the village where the children were baptized, of course, and they were also buried from this church, too, because right next to the church, the one in the background, there is also a cemetery there, too, and the children were buried there for a short period of time, and then they were moved, after the basilica was built, they were buried in the basilica. And I think it was very interesting to note that when they dug up the graves, that Jacinta's face had not corrupted. It was just the same as when she had died. The rest of the body had corrupted, but the face had not.
I think that's one of the criteria they use in sainthood. But not that all saints have that. Not all bodies are incorrupt. But
no, there have been several.
There have been, yes, there certainly have.
And in fact, it was very interesting because the day that we were here and went into the little parish church here, there actually was a funeral going on, and so the church was quite packed with a lot of folks that were here. It's a beautiful church.
It's a large church. I was surprised at how big it was for the times. Well,
this is what we might explain to our viewers, is that the parish church here took in several of the little tiny villages that were all the way around here. We saw that some of the names earlier, and we can see that this served a little bigger area than probably that I would have thought of anyway. I thought maybe it just served one particular little town, but it didn't. I think there were several little towns here. These were some of the relatives, of course, that were buried here in this cemetery. Very well kept up.
Oh,
very
it was
nice.
There. I love going in cemeteries and reading the dates of when people died. That's one of the places I always go to, right in the dead center of town.
Right in the dead center. But you do leave the flowers there, right?
I do leave the flowers. Yes.
Okay,
yes,
that's great.
Yes.
Well, we can see they were ready to receive
very well kept
the
up.
remains of the person that they were giving the last. I don't want to say the last rites. They were giving
the
final right.
interment. But they bury one on top of the other. I don't know. They have lots of land, but they still bury one on top of the other.
Yeah, our guide was explaining that to us too, and there were also a few mausoleums here where some of the religious were buried as well. But we're going to go now we're going to go down into Fatima to the basilica itself.
The basilica was consecrated in 1953. It was built with limestone. Limestone is the type of stone that you have in all this area in the center of Portugal, and with this neoclassical style. Very interesting too, because you have these very modern stained glass windows. You have at the sides of the church these small altars, these golden altars if you want, which represent the 15 mysteries of the Rosary. We can't forget that the Rosary is very important for the message of Fatima. And you also have the Stations of the Cross, of course. You have in the main altar that painting representing Our Lady of Fatima, representing the children too, the witnesses of the apparition. And you also have, I think you can see, you also have on the left-hand side, down the picture, you can see the bishop. You can see his pointy hat, so he's the bishop, Dom Manuel Alves Correia da Silva, that in 1930 got the approval or received the approval. Also, you will see here in front of the main altar, there is a little statue of Our Lady of Fatima. On that wall, I will show you later, but on that wall you have a black medallion with the silhouette of this man, of the bishop, and is there inside the wall that he is buried. So, we will start with Francisco's tomb on the right-hand side, right after the pulpit. Then we will cross, and to the other side, on the left-hand side, you have Jacinta's tomb. And later, when you are on the top of the church, you can also admire the big organ, pipe organ, which is not an old one, like the Baroque ones or something, but is very interesting because it has 12,000 pipes, when normally a regular organ has around 7,000, so this is 12,000, and the sound is very, very interesting, I can tell you, and it's a little bit like the one outside, the music we were hearing when you arrived, but of course we had 500 people probably around the little chapel. You have to imagine when we have 500,000 or 600,000, organ is played, people is singing and praying. This is really a different atmosphere. This statue is protected with this high security glass, and when you have mass, just to honor, in fact, the people who's there, that glass is lifted off so that people can be closer, in fact, to Our Lady of Fatima. Also, if you pay attention to it, you will see that in the crown there is different kinds of precious stones. In fact, this is the precious crown that the statue wears in the very important days. It's not the everyday crown, if you want. Now she's wearing a different crown, a gilt crown, a gold, in fact, but simple, if you want. For the big ceremonies, the very important days, she wears this precious crown. It has around 3,500 precious stones, and curiously, now in this crown, we also have the bullet which hit the Pope in 1981, and it came again last year, May 2000, for the beatification of Jacinta and Francisco. And so, in the middle, during all this time, one commission of bishops, Portuguese bishops, went to the Vatican, and the Pope, he really wanted to offer the bullet to Portugal, to Fatima, and he did.
Here in the Basilica, we see the tomb of Francisco, and he died on the 4th of April in 1919 in his parents' home, of course, which we saw a little earlier. And he died a very saintly death. I mean, he was in prayer all the time and also penance toward consoling our Lord. And his remains were put here in the Basilica on the 13th of March of 1952. Now, of course, also buried in just a little further from here in the Basilica itself is the tomb of Jacinta. And of course, as you remember, she was born on the 11th of March in 1910, and her death took place on the 20th of February in 1920, and she died in a hospital, so she didn't die at home. We also have, of course, the remains here of the bishop that we can see in the Basilica here. It's quite a large, beautiful building, and there are lots of wonderful things to see in the Basilica, and they've been working on it. They've been doing some restoration on the outside of it, and on the inside as well. And here we can see the tomb, of course, of Jacinta. And I think this was really quite beautiful, the way that they displayed this, don't you, Betty?
Yeah, it's very simple.
Yes, and but yet very powerful in the way that we can see. And here I think that is maybe to represent a glove. I'm not quite sure. I didn't know what that was on her tomb for sure.
I can't answer that either. I'm sorry, I don't know.
But this was really quite nice, the way that this was put here inside the Basilica. And, of course, we can see the organ up here in the back of the Basilica. There isn't a stick left of that tree because people took it away as souvenirs.
Yeah, they did that in the Garden of Gethsemane. They've had to put a fence around so that nobody can pluck any more off of it.
I think so. Well, it's been a wonderful visit to Fatima, and we hope that you enjoyed it along with us. And we're going to see you next time on the Adventures Travel Club. Betty, give us your phone number in case people are interested in trips coming up.
My phone number is 559-488-7443, and we do have our schedule for 2002.
Good. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.